Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Future of XYZ. We have the incredible privilege of speaking with Carlo Mondavi about the future of viniculture. Carlo, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Lisa, thanks. Pleasure is mine, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. So thanks for hosting this. This is great.
Thank you. So, I mean, Carlo, you have such a long history in viniculture. I mean, first of all, your father is, Tim Mondavi, a great winemaker. Your grandfather was Robert Mondavi, who any Californian or any wine drinker in the entire world knows, celebrated, in 2019, 100 years of winemaking in California. Your own vineyard that you started with your brother in 2013 is called RAEN Winery, not spelled like the things that falls from the sky, but we'll talk about that. You're the founder of the Monarch Challenge, as well as the co-founder and chief farming officer for Monarch Tractor. It's a pretty impressive resume, and I just am excited to speak with you. And I think that the first question, of course, on the future of viniculture is, what is viniculture?
Yeah, no, thank you, Lisa. And it's big shoes to fill with my grandfather and my father. And so I'm at long story there. So viniculture is the combination of viticulture and enology. Enology is the science of winemaking. Viticulture is the science in the art of farming vineyards. And viniculture is literally the idea of farming to make wine. So that's the word. We call it wine growing. My father, winemaking, viticulture, vineyard specialist. We call it wine growing. Viniculture is a great way to say it as well. So yeah,
it's great, and of course it has a long history. I mean, wine has a long history, right? I mean, I don't know, since maybe the beginning of man, we've been growing grapes and fermenting them for this alcoholic consumption. I mean, your last name, I'm presuming, is Italian. I don't know that, but I'm assuming from Mondavi. I've spent a lot of time in France, and as a Californian, obviously, know very little about wine. Talk to me about the history, if you will, of wine a bit, and also of your family's 100-year history in making wines in California.
Amazing. Yeah. No, wine has been around since the beginning of human civilization. In fact, that's kind of, you start to see the gathering of humans, you start to see the, wine tracing back to those times, which is really, really incredible to think about. My family's history is, a little bit shorter. This 2019, which I'm actually enjoying right now, of RAEN, marks our 100th consecutive harvest. We haven't been through the same exact facility, but or same business, just setbacks, challenges. It's been a very, over those 100 years, a lot of ups and downs. Going back to Prohibition, which happened in 1919. In fact, California goes back to the 1830s with the first grapes being brought into Napa and Sonoma, and kind of through the missions and whatnot. And then 1861 with Charles Krug, the oldest winery, commercial winery in California, there in Napa. And then my family's journey going back really began because of Prohibition in 1919, which is crazy that we did that to ourselves. We enacted Prohibition, making the consumption of things like wine and spirits illegal, which is just mind-blowing. But there was a loophole in Prohibition, and that was that the government wasn't willing to go against the church, and they were not willing to go against medicine. And so my family, we were actually put out of business. We had a little saloon and a boarding house. And so we moved to California to ship grapes to the families throughout the United States, because during Prohibition, the consumption of wine doubled, and it was this really, really incredible time. And being put out of business and loving wine as my great grandfather did, and my great grandmother, we moved to California. We were looking for the best grapes, and that led us to first led us to California, and then led us to Lodi, Napa, Sonoma, and kind of the areas where my family is still.
Which is, for anyone internationally or who doesn't know, that those counties are north of San Francisco in California, both inland and towards the coast.
Yeah, and they have a really unique climate, because we have this incredible cold air coming from the San Francisco Bay and from the Pacific Ocean, which is one of the coolest, right out there is one of the coolest channels of water in the world. And so you get these really incredible diurnal shifts where it's very cold at night, you're wearing a puffy at night, and then you can be in a t-shirt during the growing season in the daytime. And so it's a really unique climate, which has led to some of these wines that sit really in the company of the great wines of the world. And that was a dream my grandfather had, that we can make wines that can sit in the company of the great wines of the world. And in 1965, he was asked to leave the winery that my family had at the time, and actually still my family runs, which is Charles Krug. My cousins, my second cousins, the Peter Mondavi family, great history with Charles Krug. And then 65, we were asked to leave. 66, my grandfather began Robert Mondavi. 1979, Opus One, and then we began to grow outwardly. And then in 2004, we went public, and it was a whole long story. Worst thing that we could have done. Hindsight being 2020, and actually, it all led to great things. But 04, we sold Robert Mondavi. 05, my grandfather Robert, father Tim, and my aunt Marcy began Continuum, and we stopped making anything but that one wine in Napa. And I'd gone to college in France, worked in Burgundy. My brother Dante is a crazy Pinot Noir guy. In fact, my grandfather Robert was crazy about Pinot Noir, and my father as well. They passed that bug on to us. And so in 2013, my brother Dante and I, we began making RAEN on the true Sonoma coast. We went off on our own and began this project. And that kind of, I really grazed over everything, but I think that that's just the cliff notes. So,
I mean, the story requires a book and a movie and all sorts of things that I'm sure have happened and will continue to happen, because it is 100 years of legacy winemaking is unto itself a story. So thank you for consolidating it. I have two things. I mean, on RAEN, I want to hear about the principles behind RAEN, how it's different, etc. But I also want to give you huge congratulations. I mean, it was just announced that your 2019 vintage of, I think it's called the Seacoast, is it, or Seafields,
yeah,
of the 19 Pinot Noir just scored 99 points. I mean, from James Suckles, who's one of the biggest wine critics out there right now. So huge congratulations. I think your Chardonnay and your other two Pinots also got above 97. So this is no small feat for a reasonably young winery, is it not?
Thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible. And James Suckling, also coming from him, and he's one of the great, I think, wine critics of our generation now. And so it was a huge honor to get such a great review, and to be in the company of the wines. His wines that he selects each year tend to be some of the wines that I truly love, and so I've always gravitated towards kind of his palate. So it's been an honor to be in the company that he considers to be great wines, and certainly to have that score too, which is lovely.
It's amazing. And I think also, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but there's lots of buzzwords being thrown out in all sorts of farming right now, right? But especially in viniculture. I mean, biodynamic, organic, all natural, sulfate free. I mean, it kind of continues. RAEN was founded on some certain principles and is in fact an acronym. Can you talk about how RAEN is different? And I think it probably ties into the Monarch Challenge as well, a little bit.
Yeah, and well, yeah. The Monarch Challenge kind of became a part of something that I saw bigger when I began RAEN, because I followed really in the footsteps of my father and my grandfather with this idea that we can farm in harmony with nature, and we can elevate the farm, and that we can hopefully leave something better than we found it, and kind of elevate where the forest doesn't end at the vineyard, and kind of the wildlife continues throughout. And so RAEN, the name itself, stands for kind of the idea that the miracle of water becoming, or the alchemy of water becoming wine, happens every year in the vineyards naturally without doing anything at all. And then the unique spelling stands for our dedication to research in agriculture and enology naturally. So, all native fermentations, we don't add yeast, we don't allow yeast in the winery, we don't filter, we're very pure and clean in the cellar and very hands-off. And we spend a tremendous amount of our time on A. And the reason why we say agriculture instead of viticulture is because we're really looking at the whole entire farm. And so we began farming as a permaculture first, which I think is the holy grail of farming, where the farm permanently sustains itself. If you have something bad that is an unwanted insect, you have beneficial flowers that bring in beneficial insects that kick out the bad. It's basically stressing biodiversity, the idea of polyculture, multiple things happening at one place to create that kind of path forward. And I really believe that leads to a healthier soil microbiome, a healthier farm biology, and at the end of the day, a better quality of fruit that you get that makes a more delicious wine. And so that's always been something that we've focused on at RAEN, and that's something I've inherited from my grandfather, my father's overall philosophy, and now we're trying to really elevate that, which is exciting. So we pull on permaculture, biodynamics, and then we base out as it were a no-till farm. So I mean, we're basically doing that to protect climate change, because when you till, you release carbon back into the atmosphere, all that carbon that you've been fixing. And I also believe that it leads to a better, healthier soil microbiome. And so that, and then so we would base that at regenerative, basically, which are all beyond organic principles, and all very tangible. You can document all of those, but yeah, it's not one or the other, it's a mix. But permaculture first for us.
I like that. I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, let's go back to this amazing 99 points that you just scored on this one bottle, for instance, or this one vintage of the Pinot Noir. There are now wines being produced literally in every US state, in most countries in the world. Consumption has just exploded over the last, let's say, 20, 30 years. I mean, as we think about the farming principles, right? How do you see this evolving, and how do you see wine necessarily adapting both to climate change, but also to consumer demand?
Yeah, I mean, well, so much in that. I think the biggest thing is that we are going into a climate emergency right now. I mean, the world is in a place that is terrifying. That means that some areas are perspective that weren't maybe favorable last year, maybe becoming favorable in terms of climate now. But overall, it's a terrifying, we've seen the vertical rise of greenhouse gases in our planet, and we've seen wildfires and ice caps melting, and it's a terrifying time. So I think that the biggest thing that we need to do, wherever the wine is coming from, is treat our planet like we're going through a climate emergency, and have everything date back or tie back to how are we going to protect our planet while we progress the quality of our farming and the quality of our winemaking. And so, that I know I'm not quite answering all of the questions you asked, but I think that is perhaps the most important thing. And then from there, finding the nuances of where the great vineyards are, what grows well and what sites, and all that. But it's an exciting time on the wine scene globally. It's also a terrifying time right now for anyone to be thinking about farming. It's just scary.
It is. I think that's a pretty interesting opportunity, I think, to just dive in quickly about what can consumers do. I mean, again, the labeling is confusing. The labeling is not regulated, is not globally consistent. I mean, what would you tell any consumer, myself included, like to look for on a label, or ask your local, wine shop owner?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times it's really terrifying for wineries to go and it's like, I'm going to become, certified organic or Demeter biodynamic. I'm going to go through a certification process, can cost a lot of time and money. And then every year you're being audited. It's like inviting the IRS to come in and audit. It's really a hard thing to do. So what I recommend for consumers is to get to know the wineries and find the small wineries. I mean, Dante and I farm only 18.5 acres. People know us personally, and they get to know us. Find wineries around the world that and then certainly, obviously, if they are certified Demeter or biodynamic or organic, that's a plus. That gives more bite to the reality, because I can go to the farmer's market in Sonoma and know that Catina's tomatoes are farmed organically, because I know Catina and Kyle from Single Thread, and I know and I know they're farming at the highest level. They don't have to be certified because I know. But now when you go to Whole Foods or somewhere, to a grocery store, and you see tomatoes, you have no idea where they came from. So certification becomes really important there. But I think that asking questions, and talking to the wineries and asking them, what are you guys doing? And then, I think certification is becoming more and more important now, because it's just, it adds, that does show that they're dedicated to that. But
Yep. I appreciate that, and I think it's helpful for everyone listening to know what we can do to support. But what I hear there is local, get to know, your people. I mean, it's about relationships, like so many things, and then of course what I'm hearing in the entire, value chain of winemaking, one of the major things is the farming. I mean, how the grapes are grown and harvested and how the soil is kept is in fact the major point of influence and change on climate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I think first, great climate to make great wines, great site, all that. That's a whole. Then on top of that, the just kind of idea of trying to progress our planet and do things better. And that's one of the reasons why I began Monarch Tractor through the Monarch Challenge was to be able to allow, because right now there's a greater carbon footprint associated with organic farming. There's organic contact sprays are not as powerful as synthetic sprays. So when you're going out and farming organically, you're driving the tractor more. You have a bigger carbon footprint. It's more expensive also. So now you have there's always been these two fights. Like you protect your soil microbiome and your farm biology, and you're hurting the planet because you're burning more diesel. Or you spray chemicals, you destroy your farm microbiology and your soil microbiome, and you're great for the planet, but you're hurting nature. So there was always this, you had to choose. And so the Monarch tractor, being all electric, being driver optional, allows for farms to farm organically, regeneratively, biodynamically, all the beautiful farming practices without the carbon footprint and also without the cost associated. And so it allows for a bridge into making organic farming essentially the new conventional. And so now you'll see, there is a future where I do believe there's a future where there are no more chemicals where you can use different light at different times. Like at Monarch Tractor, we're working with Cornell University. They have this UV light program that they're working on to try to fight fungicides with light instead of things like sulfur or systemics. Yeah, that's for sure. It's just we're getting there, and that's one of the things that I'm happy to be on my second part of my life. My focus in the company, the great wines of the world, but then with Monarch Tractor, how can we do this at a commercial level for farms where it doesn't affect our carbon footprint, and where actually we can go from fossil fuel farming to renewable energy farming and have a path forward to a brilliant planet that allows for us to do all the things that we want to do and that we should do.
And great wine. I mean, to boot. As we start thinking about wrapping up, I have two questions. I mean, your family has now been doing this in California for 100 years, 102 years actually, right? What is your vision? I mean, you have so much passion clearly for the regenerative agriculture, for the reduction of carbon footprint, for so much that is necessary. What is your vision for RAEN and for the Mondavi family and for California wines and viniculture globally for the next 100 years?
I think there's a lot of, for RAEN, for sure, our goal continues to be to make wines that can sit in the company of the great wines of the world, that we're a Pinot Noir domain focused on Pinot Noir. I'm drinking Chardonnay right now, but that we can make, Pinot Noir that can sit in the company of the great wines of the world. We have what we consider to be California Grand Cru vineyards. And so our focus within those 18.5 acres is just to continue to elevate on all fronts, on our farming, on our everything we do in the cellar, and so on. And then the next 100 years, I think, the goal is to try to come to some sort of, as a planet, climate neutrality, some sort of climate stability, right? Where we're no longer emitting so many greenhouse gases in a disproportionate amount that our planet can actually metabolize. And so that we come to some sort of balance where what we put out is also being regenerated back. And so that's my dream, my hope. And I think that if we're able to do that, then we can deal with all the challenges that we have as farmers that are normal and not with like a planet that's burning. And so it's a terrifying time right now. And I just hope that, we can figure that out. And that's one of the, apart from my love of farming, and part of the reason why I began the Monarch Challenge and the Monarch Tractor was to be able to have a planet that's safe, that I can pass on, this estate that I've, really worked hard with my brother on to, my niece and my future children, so that, we have something that can become a legacy. Because if we don't start acting now, we won't have that path forward based on what we're doing right now. So my goal, I'll just say, for the next 100 years is that we figure this out, and we protect our planet the way that we need to. We take it for the sacred place that it is, and we figure out a way to coexist with nature here, versus dominate and do kind of what we've been doing for the last 100 years or so. So
it couldn't be said better. And I think you're a great steward of that, and obviously an inspiration for many. We've been super wonky for the most part for the last, 20 minutes or so. I'm going to just level up. I mean, we're talking about wine, which is something, so many people enjoy, myself included, you as well in Italy right now, where you're farming some beautiful land up in Piemonte. What is it? Tell me, and tell people who are listening and watching, favorite wine, which context do you enjoy it being enjoyed? Obviously that's a big, bold question, but to end on.
No, so yeah, that's a great question, Lisa. I always say, and this is something so funny, because I really believe the best wines, when I think about the best wines that I've had, they literally were wines that were absolutely exceptional on every measure of the wine. They were flawless, aromatic, textural. They give you, for me, they've been part of the inspiration for why I began RAEN, actually, with my brother. But they gave us a different dimension of energy that, I still get goosebumps when I think about these wines. But there was another dimension to those wines. I was with either my grandfather, my father, someone very special. And so there's the context of all sorts of things happening. What is the barometric pressure outside? What did you have for breakfast? What's your blood sugar like? Are you healthy? How are you feeling? All these things go into eventually this perfect moment with wine. And then on top of that, a great wine from a great site. And some of these wines have been from Napa with my grandfather, some of the old Napa wines that my grandfather and my father made. I just recently, this last year, had an 01 Massetto on my father's 70th birthday with an 08 Continuum. And I was just in love with Cabernet and Cabernet Franc, and it was amazing. For me personally, Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir are my two favorite varieties. I am all about ethereal, delicate, elegant, lifted, bright wines. And so it's impossible to give one. I love the wines my fiance makes, which is Agricola Brandini, amazing. I just was out to dinner, Giovanni Careggia from Matteo Careggia, and we had a bottle of Papa, which is dedicated to his father. It was amazing. Nebbiolo. Giovanni Gaia, I just had their most recent bottling of Gaia, which was just incredible. And then I'm a big Burgundy guy. I love Dujac. I love the family has some of the great holdings. They farm at such a high level. They make wines that just hit you in such a special way. They're really special wines. And then of course, this is kind of a holy grail wine, but this was one of the wines that I had with my grandfather at the estate on a day that changed my life, which was Romani Conti, which it sounds cliche to say this because it's an insane wine, almost impossible to find. But no, it's a whole mix. There's so many bottles of wine. It can't be just one, but I can remember the ones that hit me, and it's not just the bottle, it's the time, it's the place, it's who you're with.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty special way of ending, because this whole wonky conversation about regenerative agriculture and everything else certainly pulls together all of the science and the data and everything else. But of course, it's much more about the experience, the culture, and who you're enjoying it with. With that, Carlo, and it looks like maybe you're frozen in Italy, but thank you so much for joining us on Future of XYZ. It's really been a pleasure chatting. I can't thank you enough. And congratulations again to RAEN Winery on your most recent accolades. And to everyone watching and listening, Carlo is in a really good position frozen there. But if you haven't already subscribed to Future of XYZ on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, please do so. And follow us on Future of XYZ on Instagram. We will see you next week. And it was a great conversation with Carlo Mondavi of RAEN Winery out in Sonoma, California. Thank you.